Now I'd like to introduce to you two of my close friends, Peter and Sue Schultz. Like me, they're originally from Australia and now we work together at Brooklyn at the World Headquarters. Peter, as you realize, we've been talking about the matter of keeping and maintaining a positive attitude. I know that quite a number of years ago, you and Sue and other members of your congregation went through a traumatic experience. Would you mind just briefly telling us a little bit about it?
Yes, Jeff, we have to go back to Sunday, July 21, 1985. Our congregation was meeting that morning for the public talk in Sydney, Australia. And during the public talk, there was a massive explosion in the Kingdom Hall. We learned later that a bomb had been placed underneath the platform and it went off just a few feet from where the speaker was standing. Unbelievably, he survived. But when the police arrived, and to their credit, they got there very quickly, they expected to find a Kingdom Hall full of dead bodies. But there was only the one death, a brother and very dear friend who was sitting with his family just on our left. When the dust and debris had settled sufficiently, I naturally was looking for my wife. She disappeared. And then I saw her boots sticking out from underneath a large ceiling bat that had fallen to the floor. And so I put it aside and was shocked when I looked at her face. Obviously something very solid had hit her square in the middle of this area of the face and knocked her and her chair over backwards. So this whole area was very badly damaged. Her upper lip was severed right across and it was hanging down on her chin. And there was a gouge of flesh taken out of her left biceps. On the positive side, I was reassured to see that there wasn't much bleeding, but I learned later that I was mistaken. She actually bled heavily down into her stomach.
So I ended up being taken to a trauma centre in one hospital in Sydney, and Peter was sent to another hospital, and he had to stay overnight because doctors had to operate on his arm.
Of course, the very next morning I was eager to get to Sue, so the hospital released me that morning, and I went over to the hospital where Susie was staying, and when I found her, Jeff, I wouldn't have recognised her. Her face had swollen up like a melon. Even her eyelashes, not just her eyes, but her eyelashes were buried in swollen tissue. Where her eyes should be were just two lines across her face. Of course, she couldn't see a thing, which I assume under the circumstances might have been a blessing.
That was good.
Well, just from what you inferred there, I'm wondering, was there an issue with the blood? But you mentioned it was bleeding.
Yes, the blood issue came up immediately when they realised that there was a lot of bleeding. Whatever had hit me, artery behind the nose had either burst or been punctured, we're not sure which. And so the blood was running down into my stomach all that time. So, of course, the hemoglobin dropped right down. It was about 6. So the surgeon that was assigned to me, he said, well, yes, he would do the operation to get the bones reset and all that, but only if I would give him the option to use blood. So that was, we tried to reason with him for many days. Peter especially had quite a few sessions with him, but it ended up, he finally said, I'm not doing the operation. So at that time, it was about now 10 or 11 days, and for me it was becoming critical for the face, even though all the stitching was done immediately and that was healing up nicely, but the bones were in the wrong places and now they were starting to set. You know, they needed to be put back in place. So at that time, I think there were no hospital liaison arrangement. Pete and I felt like a couple of little duckies trying to go through uncharted waters. We just didn't know literally where to put our foot next, which door to knock on next. It was stressful, wasn't it, love, that time?
Yes, it was like we were walking toward a huge brick wall with no way around, no way to get past this thing. And we begged Jehovah, what do we do? How do we deal with this situation? Because we had no idea. Anyway, just as our nose was about to hit the wall, so to speak, a door opened. A brother who was a general practitioner had got in touch with a plastic surgeon who said he'd take a look at Sue, and he did.
Yes, completely different attitude. He said, yes, I'm prepared to do this, but I'll use a different procedure. And he felt that procedure, he would not even, blood wouldn't even be an issue. But he did say, I want to make sure your hemoglobin must be 9 before I'm prepared to do this. Well, for many days already, we had been working on getting, my blood up, or my blood in better condition, because we were trying to cooperate with the hospital staff and the previous doctor as much as we could. So our dear friends at Bethel, each day they were juicing vegetable juices full of iron, and every night bringing them up, and we'd hear the bottles rattling down the corridor, wouldn't we, Pete? And we'd say, here comes the jungle juice. So down the straw it went, and when I had the blood test, the hemoglobin had already gone through 9. We were very happy. So the surgeon went ahead, wired up my jaw and put the frame, the little scaffolding on, and I was good to get healed.
Well, we're so happy that was successful. But does that mean you haven't had any other problems afterwards?
Well, like a car that's been dinged, there's a few rattles, right? So my sense of smell couldn't be restored. I had to have eardrum grafts. I wish they would grow back. I said, Peter's grew back, and I said, how come yours grew back? But anyway, I had them surgically put in. Severe headaches were the problem I found for many years after the bomb. But I think one of the things that wears on your nerves the most, and I'm sure a lot of the brothers and sisters who went through the bombing either experienced it or even still do, and that's the tinnitus, the constant ringing, buzzing in your ears, and that hasn't stopped since the bombing. So in the new system, we'll be the ones sitting out in the paddock listening to silence.
Well, thanks for explaining all that. But now, Peter, you mentioned too that beyond the physical problems that you were dealing with, there were some other issues you had to handle.
Yes, I guess you could say we both suffered from what I assume was post-traumatic stress. Our nerves had taken a real beating, and we were both emotionally exhausted from the whole ordeal. Seeing a dear brother and friend killed just feet away from us, seeing the congregation suffering, seeing what Susie went through, that really took its toll on both of us. And just to illustrate, Sue for years had difficulty sleeping, and I had difficulty too, but Susie even more so. And she began to suffer from panic attacks. She was always very relaxed on the platform, even at large gatherings. But now she couldn't finish reading the text comments at the field service group without running out of breath. In those days, that was the custom. So I or another brother had to finish the reading.
Yes, Pete got used to me going, you finished.
Well, our hearts go out to you. It must have been a very difficult time. There was also, you said, a question you had to grapple with in your mind.
Yeah, sometimes, people would say, why would Jehovah allow such an atrocity to be perpetrated against a congregation of his people?
Well, it's not a bad question. It's one that we need to answer. And how were you able to work your way through that?
Well, Susie and I often tried to remind ourselves and impress it on our heart that there are bigger issues here than the preservation of our individual human lives. There's Jehovah's sovereignty and his name, and of course the integrity of his worshippers, and what are our motives for serving him. And of course, as we know from the Bible, Jehovah didn't promise that he would shield every one of us individually from physical harm. In fact, Jesus even said that some of his followers would be persecuted and killed. And besides that, our brothers die from horrible diseases. Others are killed or maimed in accidents or in natural disasters. That's just life in this old system, isn't it? And so Jehovah helps us. And we found the biggest way in which he helps us is by giving us comfort and encouragement, mainly through our dear brothers and sisters. And Jehovah did that abundantly with us, especially our family and our close friends.
And Sue, would you like to just give us a little bit from your side as well, what you learned?
Yes, there was an absolute outpouring of support. Some of our family travelled from the other side of the country, and they were with us the first couple of weeks right there in the hospital. That was a real comfort. And our spiritual family, brothers and sisters, there were bouquets of flowers coming into the hospital. There seemed to be an endless stream of cards and letters, some from brothers and sisters in other countries. And you know, it was such a lovely witness, because quite a few of the nursing staff would comment on all this, and they say, "Do you know all these people?" So we'd say, "Well, we don't know them, but they're our spiritual family, our brothers and sisters." It was funny with the flowers. You remember Peter was valiantly doing his man's job of caring for these flowers, trying to water them.
The bed was like a botanic garden surrounded by flowers.
Nice. So Pete's watering them, and one day I heard the nurse say to him, "Peter, I think you'll find that those flowers you're watering are silk." So we had a good laugh.
That's
but
probably
he was
why
doing
we
good.
don't have him working in the garden in Bethel.
That's what it is. But, you know, with the cards, the words, the well-chosen words that brothers and sisters wrote on those cards, they touched our hearts. And it was like, you know, they use the expression, a warm blanket put over you. It was like they were right there in that hospital ward with us, saying, "We're right there with you. We're right behind you." And that was a tremendous comfort. But then sometimes you get, you know, the down days where you just feel totally depressed and you're at the end of your tether. And the spiritual food is so essential. And that's what Jehovah provides. It just gets you right out of yourself and say, okay, focus again. I remember vividly one day Peter brought, it was one of those down days, and he had brought up the latest Watchtower from Bethel, and it had an article in it that he read to me about one of our precious brothers in Africa. He had endured brutal physical persecution. And when Peter finished the article, just thinking of that brother's integrity under those circumstances, his loyalty to Jehovah, you know, it stops you focusing on yourself. You say, look, stop focusing on yourself. Look at what others are going through. It inspires you. You say, I want to be just like that. I just printed out the last little part of that article. Can I share it?
Please, we'd love to hear it.
This is how the article finished. What helped this loyal supporter of God's kingdom to endure brutal treatment? For 3 months, he was entirely on his own. He fully expected to die. And yet when asked how he felt during this ordeal, his answer was, I felt that Jehovah was with me all the time. There were no complaints against his persecutors or lamenting over what had happened to him, just firm conviction that Jehovah never forsakes his loyal servants. Isn't that great? That's inspiring.
Now, I don't want to embarrass you both, but those of us who work with you view you both as excellent examples of those that have a positive spirit, positive attitude. Just how can you keep a positive attitude when you've been through such a horrific, traumatic event?
Yes, that's a good question. And I can honestly say, Jeff, that if Susie and I were to stew over the horrible thing that happened to our congregation, it would be very easy to become bitter or even depressed. But as Jehovah's people, we have so much going for us. We have so much help. We've got Jehovah's Word. We've got Holy Spirit. We've got a wonderful hope for the future. And we've got loving brothers and sisters. And we found that when you take full advantage of those precious gifts, then Jehovah strengthens and comforts you and he helps you. And I've seen that with Sue, because when we go through trials and we take advantage of those gifts, the trials actually mold us and refine us. They don't harden us. Many in the congregation we've both seen have been refined and molded by this experience. And I've seen it with Sue. I can honestly say that she's a more compassionate and understanding person as a result of what she's been through. She didn't want me to say that, but I said it anyway.
I'm sure she'll forgive you. And Sue?
Yes, we have tried to focus ahead, and the reason is Jehovah tells us this is not the real life in his word. And Peter and I firmly believe that. The real life is ahead. And anything that happens to any of us in this old system, Jehovah can undo it 110% in the new world. So we've tried to leave things in Jehovah's hands as to how it works out, and just focus on what's coming up. And in that way, we've been able to put the bombing behind us and get on with life.
Yeah, that has helped to give us an inner peace. Jehovah's hands are much bigger and much stronger than ours.
Well, those are some beautiful expressions, and thank you both for being willing to express how you felt about those circumstances. If you'd like to read the full account of their experience, it was published in the Awake magazine of January 8, 1992. It's true that very few of us have had things like that happen to us, but many of us have had to face a test while dealing with serious health problems. Additionally, many different traumatic events can cause us to experience a form of post-traumatic stress. Hasn't this interview shown us that even though someone's experience may be different from ours, we can still learn some valuable lessons from listening to their stories?